My daughter Lily had been looking forward to Halloween for months. She's 7, and this was the year she decided she wasn't going to be a princess or a fairy. No, this year she was going as a warrior queen. She spent weeks designing the costume with me, sketching out ideas in her little notebook, picking out fabrics. I even stayed up late for several nights hand-sewing details onto the tunic she wanted. It was perfect, and she felt like $1,000,000 in it. That's why what Ella did cut so deep. Ella's my younger sister. We've always had a complicated relationship. She's always been the one who gets away with everything, the one who everyone makes excuses for. If she messes up, it's because she's sensitive or artistic or going through a phase. I'm the responsible one, the one who always has to clean up her messes, both literally and figuratively. The Halloween party was at my mom's house. I should have known better than to agree to go, but Lily was so excited to show off her costume to her cousins. As soon as we walked in, I could feel the tension. Ella was already there, perched on the arm of the sofa, holding court with my cousins, Sarah and Emily. She gave me this sickly sweet smile when she saw us. "Oh, look who finally decided to join us," she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. I just smiled back, trying to diffuse the situation. "Hey, Ella." Lily's excited to see everyone. Lily, oblivious to the undercurrents, ran off to join the other kids. I kept an eye on her, but I also wanted to grab a glass of wine and try to relax. That's when I heard the scream. It was Lily. I ran towards the sound, my heart pounding in my chest. I found her in the backyard, surrounded by a group of horrified kids. Her costume was ripped in several places, and red paint was splattered all over it. She was sobbing, her face streaked with tears and red dye. "Mommy," she wailed, throwing herself into my arms. "Aunt Ella ruined my costume." I looked up, and there was Ella, standing on the back porch, a smug look on her face. She was holding an empty can of red spray paint. "Oh, relax," she said, rolling her eyes. "It's just a costume. And honestly, it was kind of ugly anyway." That's when I lost it. "What the hell is wrong with you?" I screamed, my voice shaking with rage. That was Lily's favorite costume. I spent hours working on that. Why would you do something like that? She just shrugged. "I don't know. It was just there. And she looked so ridiculous." "Ridiculous?" I repeated, incredulous. "She looked amazing. She felt amazing. You did this on purpose, didn't you? You're jealous because she's happy and confident, and you can't stand it." "Jealous," she scoffed. "Of a 7-year-old? Don't flatter yourself. You're always like this, Ella," I continued, my voice trembling. "You always have to tear other people down to make yourself feel better. You're a horrible person." I grabbed Lily's hand and stormed back inside, ignoring Ella's protests. I found my mom in the kitchen and told her what happened. I expected her to be angry, to finally take my side for once. But instead, she just sighed. "Oh, honey, you know how Ella is," she said, patting my arm. "She doesn't mean anything by it. She's just impulsive." "Impulsive?" I exclaimed. "She deliberately ruined my daughter's costume." "That's not impulsive, that's malicious." "Well, maybe you should try to be more understanding," my mom said, her voice rising slightly. "Ella's been under a lot of stress lately. You know, with her art and everything." "Oh, please," I said, rolling my eyes. "When is she not under stress? When is it not all about Ella?" I couldn't believe it. My own mother was defending her. I felt like I was going crazy. "I'm done," I said, grabbing my purse and keys. "I'm done with this family. I'm done with Ella. And I'm done with you making excuses for her." I took Lily home, and we spent the rest of the night watching movies and eating ice cream. I tried to make her feel better, but I could see the disappointment in her eyes. She kept touching the ripped fabric of her costume, her lower lip trembling. Later that night, after Lily was asleep, I was still fuming. I couldn't let Ella get away with this. I needed to do something, anything, to make her understand the consequences of her actions. That's when I had an idea. Ella is a professional artist, which means she mostly relies on my parents to pay her bills while she paints abstract canvases that no one understands. She was working on a new series for an upcoming gallery show, a series she'd been talking about for months. She had turned my parents' garage into her personal studio, filling it with canvases, paints, and all sorts of art supplies. The next morning, I waited until I knew Ella was out networking, which is what she calls going to coffee shops and complaining about her life to anyone who will listen, and then I drove over to my parents' house. My mom was at her book club meeting, so I had the place to myself. I went into the garage and surveyed the scene. Canvases were stacked everywhere, some finished, some half-finished, some just blank. I grabbed a can of black spray paint from the shelf and started to work. I didn't ruin her canvases completely. That would have been too obvious, too easy. Instead, I added subtle details, little touches that would be almost imperceptible to the untrained eye. I painted tiny, almost invisible spiders into the corners of her landscapes. I added hidden skulls to her abstract patterns. I wrote barely legible insults in the negative space of her portraits. It took me hours, but I was meticulous. I wanted to make sure that every single canvas was subtly, almost invisibly defaced. When I was finished, I stepped back and admired my handiwork. The paintings looked the same, but they were subtly, irrevocably tainted. Anyone who looked closely would see the darkness lurking beneath the surface. I left the garage, feeling a sense of satisfaction I hadn't felt in years. I knew that Ella would eventually discover what I had done, and I couldn't wait to see her reaction. A week later, I got a call from my mom. Her voice was tight with anger. "What did you do to Ella's paintings?" she demanded. "What do you mean?" I asked, feigning innocence. "Don't play dumb with me," she snapped. "Ella discovered what you did. She's hysterical. She's saying you ruined her entire show." "Oh no," I said, trying to sound concerned. "That's terrible. What happened?" "Don't you dare pretend you don't know," my mom said, her voice rising. "She found all sorts of things hidden in her paintings. Spiders, skulls, insults. She's convinced you did it." "Well, I didn't," I said, my voice firm. "But maybe she should be more careful about who she trusts. Maybe she should think about the consequences of her actions." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I could hear my mom breathing heavily. "I can't believe you would do something like this," she finally said, her voice shaking with disappointment. "You're just as bad as Ella." "No, Mom," I said, my voice calm and steady. "I'm not. I'm just standing up for myself and my daughter. Something you've never done." I hung up the phone, feeling a sense of closure I hadn't expected. I knew that my relationship with my mom and Ella would never be the same, but I didn't care. I had finally stood up for myself, and I had finally made Ella face the consequences of her actions. 30 minutes later, everyone was gone. The red paint had been cleaned up, the ripped costume replaced with a store-bought princess dress, and Lily was happily playing with her cousins again. But the air still felt thick with unspoken words, with years of resentment and hurt. That night, I tucked Lily into bed, kissing her forehead. "I love you, sweetie," I whispered. "And I'll always protect you." She smiled sleepily. "I love you too, Mommy." As I walked out of her room, I knew that I had done the right thing. I had protected my daughter, and I had finally broken free from the cycle of abuse and manipulation that had plagued my family for so long. Later that night, I received a text message from an unknown number. "You haven't won," it read. "This isn't over." I deleted the message and turned off my phone. I knew that Ella would never truly change, but I also knew that I didn't have to let her control my life anymore. I was free. The next day, I got a call from David, a friend who owns a local art gallery. He had heard about what happened with Ella's show and wanted to offer me a space to display some of my own artwork. I'm a graphic designer by trade, but I've always dabbled in painting as a hobby. "I know it's short notice," David said, "but I have a cancellation next month, and I think your work would be a great fit. It's a small gallery, but it could be a good opportunity to get your name out there." I hesitated for a moment. I hadn't shown my work publicly in years, and the thought of putting myself out there was daunting. But then I thought of Lily, of how proud she would be to see her mom's paintings on display. "Okay," I said, my voice trembling slightly. "I'll do it." The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. I spent every spare moment in my makeshift studio, painting and preparing for the show. I felt a sense of purpose and excitement I hadn't felt in years. On the opening night of the show, I was nervous as hell. I had invited a few friends and family members, but I didn't know what to expect. As I stood there, watching people admire my paintings, I felt a surge of pride and accomplishment. Then I saw Ella walk in. My heart sank. I knew she was there to cause trouble. She walked straight up to me, her eyes narrowed. "So," she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm, "you're an artist now? How cute." I took a deep breath and tried to remain calm. "I've always been an artist, Ella," I said. "You just never noticed." "Oh, I notice," she said, her eyes scanning the room. "I notice that your paintings are derivative and uninspired. You're just trying to copy me." "I'm not trying to copy anyone," I said, my voice firm. "I'm just expressing myself." Well, you're doing a terrible job, she said, sneering. No one's going to buy this crap. I ignored her and turned to greet another guest. But Ella wasn't finished. She followed me around the gallery, making snide comments and trying to undermine my confidence. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed her arm and pulled her into a quiet corner. What do you want, Ella? I demanded, my voice shaking with anger. Why are you doing this? I want you to admit that you're a fraud, she said, her eyes blazing. I want you to admit that you're not as good as me. I'm not going to admit anything, I said, my voice rising. I'm proud of my work, and I'm not going to let you tear me down. Oh, really? She said, smirking. Then why don't we have a competition? A real art competition. We'll both create a new piece, and we'll let the public decide who's the better artist. I hesitated for a moment. I knew that Ella was trying to manipulate me, to drag me down to her level. But I also knew that I couldn't back down. I had to prove to myself, and to her, that I was capable of creating something beautiful and meaningful. Okay, I said, my voice firm. I accept your challenge. We shook hands, sealing the agreement. The competition was on. The next few weeks were even more intense than before. I spent every waking moment working on my new piece, pouring all of my energy and emotion into it. I wanted to create something that was not only beautiful but also meaningful, something that would resonate with people on a deep level. Ella, meanwhile, was busy trash-talking me to anyone who would listen. She spread rumors about me, claiming that I was a plagiarist and a hack. She even tried to sabotage my work, sneaking into my studio and messing with my supplies. But I refused to let her get to me. I focused on my work, determined to create something that would silence her once and for all. Finally, the day of the competition arrived. The gallery was packed with people, all eager to see our new pieces. Ella's painting was a large, abstract canvas filled with swirling colors and jagged lines. It was technically impressive, but it felt cold and empty. My painting, on the other hand, was a portrait of Lily. It was a simple, realistic depiction of her face, but it captured her spirit and her joy in a way that I had never been able to do before. As people viewed our paintings, I could feel their energy. They were drawn to my portrait, touched by its honesty and its warmth. Ella's painting, meanwhile, was largely ignored. Finally, the moment of truth arrived. David, the gallery owner, announced the winner of the competition. And the winner is, he said, pausing for dramatic effect, Ella. I was stunned. I couldn't believe it. I had poured my heart and soul into my painting, and it had been rejected. Ella smirked at me, her eyes filled with triumph. I told you, she said. You're not as good as me. But then David continued. But, he said, we've decided to create a special award for Ella's sister, for her portrait of her daughter. It was a beautiful piece, and it touched everyone who saw it. The crowd erupted in applause. I felt a surge of gratitude and validation. I may not have won the competition, but I had won something even more important, the respect and admiration of my peers. Ella's face fell. She realized that she had been outmaneuvered, that her attempts to sabotage me had backfired. I walked up to the stage and accepted my award. As I stood there, holding the trophy, I looked out at the crowd and saw Lily standing in the front row, beaming with pride. In that moment, I knew that I had finally found my voice, that I had finally broken free from Ella's shadow. I was no longer the victim, the doormat, the one who always had to clean up her messes. I was an artist, a mother, and a survivor. And nothing would ever take that away from me. 30 minutes later, everyone congratulated me on my success. I felt a sense of peace and contentment I hadn't felt in years. I knew that Ella would never truly change, but I also knew that I didn't have to let her control my life anymore. I was free. I will never let anyone dim my shine again.